Good afternoon. We're back with another episode of the Lord of the Rings LCG progression series. Today is a card review of the Road Darkens, which is the second box of the Lord of the Rings saga. It's kind of light on player cards, but the cards that it has are impactful. So let's take a look. Just one hero for this box, and it is Gandalf. 14 threat, which is very high. 3 questing, 3 attack, 3 shields. Interesting. So it's based on his stats alone, 5 HP. For a hero to be considered a good quester or a good battler, I like for them to contribute 4 willpower or 4 attack. There are very few that do that reliably. I consider Bjorn the best attacking hero in the game with his 5 attack. And I consider Eowyn the best quester based on stats alone with 4 willpower, but Glorfindel is better with Asfaloth because he has 3 willpower, and then he also contributes 2 progress to location every turn. Gandalf you can't match Eowyn, and he can't match Glorfindel with Asfaloth, but he's close. He can't match Bjorn in attacking. He's not that close. There's a lot of other 3 attack heroes. There's a number of other 3 willpower heroes too. Well, are there? There's Celeborn. There's probably others. 3 shields is quite strong for a hero. The ability to take an attack from a hill troll, but he's not the defender that Frodo is. Or Baragond. So he's not the best in any one category. Let's take a look at his ability and his attachments to see if he makes up for that. So, the ability, play with the top card. So first of all, he's a neutral card, so he's not going to be able to pay for any non-neutral cards without using his ability. His ability, play with the top card of your deck face up. Once per phase, you may play the top card of your deck as if it was in your hand. Once per phase, okay? When playing a card this way, Gandalf is considered to have all of the printed icons. Very interesting. So, I'm assuming you can't play allies in any phase except for the planning phase. I'm assuming this doesn't mean that you can play allies during, for example, the combat phase or the refresh phase or something like that. But that you could play an action card, an event, from your hand during any phase, as long as its conditions are met. Well, if it's a response or an action card. So this would seem to favor decks a little bit that are less ally intensive. Less ally intensive decks tend to be weak on questing power, unless there are new cards that benefit questing power. So that seems to indicate a hero that's a little bit more support or multiplayer oriented, because a lot of times in solo play you need a deck that's strong on willpower. And if you play Gandalf, you're not going to be able to take advantage of his ability to play multiple cards in the same turn, because you can only use his ability once per phase, so you can't play like multiple allies from the top of your deck. This is basically like draw a card every phase if you have a use for it, and you can only play allies during one phase. So if you have 2 allies on the top of your deck, you're not making full use of his ability. But if you're playing a deck that's heavy in events to make full use of his ability, then you're going to be light on willpower. Unless you're playing some kind of like crazy attachment deck with Lay of the Nimrodal or something like that. That's designed to augment your willpower through attachments, or, well, it'd be through events, because those are the only cards that you'd be able to play outside of planning. Let me look up if you can play allies in more than one phase. Okay, well, as far as I can tell, you can't play allies outside the planning phase because you're playing cards as if they're from your hand. So let's talk about the attachments. The ones that are in this set, and also I want to talk about an additional one, which is Expert Treasure Hunter, which comes from the On the Doorstep Hobbit box. Let's talk about Expert Treasure Hunter for a moment. 0 cost attached to a hero. After attached hero quests successfully, name a card type and discard the top card of your deck. If the discarded card is the named type, take it into your hand. So that's basically a draw one off of your deck using this card, because you are going to know what's on your deck every time, so you can name the correct type. And since you attach this to the hero, it's repeatable. Every time you quest successfully, you're going to draw a card. That's very strong with Gandalf. Very, very strong. I don't think it's strong in any other context except with Gandalf. But with Gandalf, it's very strong. Gandalf Staff is a neutral card attached to Gandalf, 2 cost. Exhaust to choose a player to draw a card. Add a resource to a hero's resource pool, or discard a shadow card from a non-unique enemy. All those effects are good. I think you're running Gandalf Staff in every deck where you're running Gandalf. It doesn't add to his ability to quest, and it doesn't add to his battle capabilities. It adds to his defense, but not significantly, although it can be significant in some cases, but that's not going to be too common. How many times would you have to use Gandalf's Staff to make the resource usage good? Probably 5. How many times would you have to draw a card to make that part good? Probably 3. Well, 4 probably. So this is a card that takes a while to pay off, and still doesn't make Gandalf exceptional at anything. So he's still kind of a support or multiplayer focused hero. Let's look at Wizard Pipe. 1 cost. Attached to an Istari, limit 1 per character. Exhaust Wizard Pipe to exchange a card in your hand with the top card of your deck. Okay, so if you have a card in your hand that you want to use Gandalf's ability to play, you can stick it back on your deck and then play it with Gandalf. So I guess that's in case you're off sphere. Your other 2 heroes don't have the right sphere for the card you want to play. And you could also use it to get an ally off the top of your deck, so that you could then look for hope that the next card is an event. You could exchange an ally on the top of your deck with an event from your hand, play the event from your hand, and then if the next card is an event, you could play it the following phase. So what we're looking at here is the support hero of all support heroes. He's similar to an Elrond with Vilya. Slow to get going, phenomenal once you do get him going. Not exceptional based on his stats in any one area. Not exceptional early game because of that. But when you get him rolling with his preferred attachment or attachments, he's quite good. That's my opinion of Gandalf. I would compare him to Elrond with Vilya. Now, Elrond with Vilya is a combination I've used to beat some of the hardest quests in the game, and that were either impossible without Elrond and Vilya in solo play, or extremely or much more difficult. And so that's what I'm expecting from Gandalf, looking at his card and his attachments. I'm expecting something similar to the role that Elrond Vilya plays for me right now, which is that he helps me beat some of the most difficult quests in the game, but not all of them, because he's a little slow in the early game, just like Elrond is. Elrond with his 3-2-3 stat line is a little slow in the early game. And I expect Gandalf will be a little slow in the early game too. And I think the additional 1 attack and the additional 1 HP that he has on Elrond is the reason for his higher threat. 1 higher threat, you're getting 1 attack, 1 HP. And I think his ability and attachments are designed to be roughly comparable to Elrond. He does have one of the downside that's worth talking about, which is that you can't play Core Set Gandalf, which is a very good card and is a must include in practically every deck I've ever built. Don't know how big of a downside that is without playtesting. Also, one other note, he can use Word of Command much easier than the Core Set Gandalf or Sauron or Radagast, and so Word of Command is probably worth talking about as well, which can really help you get set up, get your combo set up, because he can retrieve any card from your deck. Exhausting him can be a big deal. Also worth noting, compared to Elrond Vilya, Elrond has to exhaust to use Vilya. Gandalf doesn't have to exhaust to use any of his attachments or his printed ability. So that's the role. I would rank him as high, without ever having played him yet, I would rank him as high as Elrond and Vilya. Below Glorfindel, but just as high as Elrond and Vilya, without having played him. That's my opinion of him. I'm looking forward to playing him. Galadriel, 3 costs, 3 willpower, 0/0, 3 health. At the end of the round, discard Galadriel from play. That's a big deal. After you play Galadriel from your hand, search the top 5 cards of your deck for an attachment of 3, cost 3 or less, and put it into play. Put the remaining cards back in any order. So, for practical purposes, it's a 3 cost event, which gives you 3 willpower, which is bad. For 3 willpower, I'd expect 1 cost for a temporary event. You can get 3 cost or 2 cost ally for 1. Even 3 in some turns if you're playing that Sylvan Refugee with Celeborn. So based on the stats alone, it's not good. It can act as a chump blocker after you put it into play, so that's an advantage over a similar event would be. You wouldn't play an event that's 3 cost for 3 willpower without a pretty significant other effect. Now, 3 cost 3 willpower, cancel 1 attack for 3. Would you play that? Canceling 1 attack is worth 1 cost. So we could lower the cost to 2 for 3 willpower. I still don't think that's good. It's okay though. So we're looking for the ability to add something in order to say this is a good card. What does the ability add? After you play Galadriel from your hand, search the top 5 cards of your deck for an attachment of cost 3 or less and put it into play. Put the remaining cards back in any order. Okay, so you can play an attachment of cost 3 or less, and you can control what you draw next turn. Very interesting card. What is that worth? Well, you're not going to draw an attachment to play of cost 3 or less every time. So I guess it depends on your deck design, really. Obviously, if you draw a 3 cost attachment, then you just drew a card, played it for free, which means she'd basically be 0 cost and draws a card and gives you 3 willpower and can block an attack, and that is phenomenal. That's just flat out amazing. If she's a dud, she still provides something. So would you play this card in a deck where you would never draw an attachment reliably because you're not playing many of them? I don't think so. I think in such a deck this is basically a 2 cost add 3 willpower event, and that's not good. For 3 willpower and an event card, I would want it to cost 1 probably. So it's overcosted if you never get the attachment into play. if you get the attachment into play sometimes, you probably... I mean, how many attachments would you need to run to make this good? Boy, that's tough to evaluate. I think you'd need playtesting to determine how strong this is. But with a lot of 3-cost attachments, it's potentially very strong. With a small amount, boy, it's pretty tough. It could go either way. I think I'd still play it, at least to see if it's good. It'll need playtesting to see how it feels. Because this is a tough card to evaluate. Probably would need to do some math to actually determine the likelihood of drawing an attachment. The attachment can be off sphere. That's good. I've played some decks to defeat really difficult quests that really needed attachments to come out. Like, would you play this in the Elrond Vilya deck to help you find Vilya? I think I would. I think you'll be very good in an Elrond Vilya deck, and that's probably something like its ideal usage. I think it might be very good in the Gandalf deck as well, because you can put the remaining cards in any order, so you can organize it specifically so that you can get out the sequence that you want. I think that's very good too. Even in decks where you're not playing Gandalf or Elrond, if you're running a lot of attachments, I think this is potentially very good, though it's going to be a little swingy, but even when it's not very good, it's still okay. Though it's going to be somewhat disappointing and underwhelming when you don't get an attachment. But you can still put the remaining cards back in any order. I think that's a really important part of this card. It would be significantly worse if you had to shuffle after. I like this card. I'll play it. I like this card. 2 very strong cards to start this box. You can kind of understand why they didn't include that many hero cards. They're including an abnormal number of really strong cards, it seems, with Gandalf and his attachments, Staff and Wizard's Pipe. Treasure Hunter isn't in this set, remember. Yeah, very interesting box. It's good to have a really powerful hero join the club. It's been a while. It's been a while of kind of lackluster heroes or cards in general. I liked Celeborn, but he's not in the same class as Gandalf or Elrond or Glorfindel. Boromir. 4 cost, 1/3/1, 4 health. So he's a little understated. I'd like him to be 4 attack. Boromir gets 2 shields while defending against an enemy with an engagement cost higher than your threat. After Boromir takes any amount of damage, ready him. Okay, so against and like say he seems to be, his ideal usage is like a Hobbit deck, or obviously a lower threat deck where you expect to be taking some attacks. Probably the first decent defender, but even so, he can't take multiple troll attacks. I don't think the ability is going to go off that much. With 3 shields, he's just going to flat out block 1 attack a lot of the time, when you'd actually really like for him to take 1 damage so you could ready him. So that's not reliable in some cases, and in some cases you'll be able to control it. This card isn't good, I don't think. And the reason I don't think it's good is because it's overcosted for the stats. And defense is a stat that I don't value very highly, because I think a lot of the time what you're really looking for in a defensive hero is the ability, or a defensive ally, is the ability to successfully take a high attack, a high statted attack every round. Like, for example, an enemy that attacks for 6 or 7, you want him to be able to tank that every round. And Boromir even with Gondorian Shield, is going to top out at 5, so he's not worthy of being your primary defender. He's not going to be like Frodo taking the Balrog every turn, or Baragon taking an attack every turn with his 6 shields when he has Gondorian Shield. And even if he could do that, he's an ally. You wouldn't be able to get him out every time. With allies, especially unique allies, you need it to fulfill some specific function, which is almost always adding questing power or attack. And he's not an efficient way to add attack, and he's not a good quester. To play an ally specifically for shields, I would really only do that in a siege quest. In a siege quest, where I start with low threat, I probably would play this version of Boromir. But in most other situations, I don't think I would play him. Because I'm not usually looking for defense. I'm not usually looking for defense from an ally. I'm sometimes not sad when I have it, like Bjorn having high HP and shields can matter sometimes. Gildor sometimes. So he's like an efficient statted defender. Like for 4 costs to get 3 shields and 4 HP is not bad. It's just that you don't look for that from an ally very much. Usually if you need it because you're facing that every turn, and then you have to go to a hero for that because you need to guarantee you have it at the start of the game. So I think this is a niche card because I think it's useful in a siege deck, but not in many others. I'm open to being wrong about that though. I would like to like this card, but I think it's niche. Elrond, 3 cost, 3/2/3, 3 health. At the end of the round, discard Elrond from play. Okay. After Elrond enters play, choose 1, heal all damage from a hero. Discard a condition attachment, or each player draws a card. Okay, well each player drawing a card isn't very powerful in solo play. This would be a 3 cost, 3 willpower, draw 1 card. I don't think that's too good. The discard in a condition can save you from a loss. Healing all damage from a hero will be less useful. I think the discarded condition will be his strongest ability. So would you play this over, say, Power of Orthanc? I think you would in a lore deck. Discarding an attachment is only worth about 1 resource. So this would drop him to a 2 cost, 3 willpower event. Well, plus a feint, because he can block an attack, so a 1 cost, 3 willpower. So I think he's good if you need him to discard an attachment. If you gotta heal a hero to survive, and that's the case but rarely, he's good. If you're just using him to draw a card, he's okay. Drawing a card isn't worth much. I wouldn't even give it 1 resource value. So really, you're playing him in decks where you're running lore and you think you might have to discard a condition attachment. In that case, I think he's good. I'm not sure you would play him if you don't need to do that. He's not going to be bad. Like if you're running a Monosphere lore deck, would you play him? I don't think so. I think discarding him at the end of the round is a much bigger deal than people might think. I think you play this hero if you need to discard an attachment, an unfriendly attachment, and in that situation I think he's good. But otherwise I think he's a little bit underwhelming. Bilbo Baggins, 2 costs, but difficult cards to evaluate in this cycle. We have 2 very good ones, Gandalf and Galadriel, and 2 very situational ones in Boromir and Elrond. Boromir, the situation being siege questing, and Elrond, the situation being need to discard an attachment. Very interesting cards. Bilbo Baggins, 2 cost, 2 willpower, 0/0/2. After Bilbo enters play, search your deck for a pipe attachment and add it to your hand. Shuffle your deck. Well, I'm going to have to remind myself what the pipe attachments are that are available at the moment. But 2 costs for 2 willpower is very good, so it almost doesn't matter. I would run this in any deck in which I need questing minions, because 2 cost for 2 of the stat you want is great. But let me look at the pipes. Okay, well, as far as I know, there's only 2 pipes currently in the game. Wizard's Pipe. So if you're running Gandalf, I think you include Bilbo. 2 cost for 2 willpower and you get to draw the Wizard's Pipe. That's great. I'd run that in every Gandalf deck, I think. Hobbit Pipe, would you run that? Attached to a Hobbit. After your threat is reduced by an event card effect, exhaust Hobbit Pipe. I've talked about this card already. I don't think it's good, so I don't think you're running Bilbo for that. Would you run it if you happen to be running Bilbo just for his stats? Maybe a one of. If there was any chance that you could take advantage of this effect, like if you're running Galadriel's Greeting and Elrond's Counsel, or if you were running 2 threat reduction cards and Bilbo, you could throw one of the Hobbit Pipe in there. Otherwise, I don't think it's worth it. But definitely worth it in the for the Wizard Pipe with Gandalf. Good card with Gandalf. In order to make the Hobbit Pipe worth it, you need a reasonable chance it's going to draw you 2 cards. Just to be okay. 3 cards would be great. 2 would be okay. Above average, but 3 would be great. That means kind of early in the game and running a number of threat reducing cards. It's only event cards, so yeah. You could maybe combo that with the new Sylvan card, which reduces threat by a small amount. Would that make that card better? It might, to be honest. But I don't think a lot better. It's kind of a combo that's a little bit harder to pull off and has kind of a low payoff overall. So yeah, I think the only deck you throw Hobbit Pipe in is if you're running Galadriel's Greeting and Elrond's Counsel. And Bilbo. But otherwise you're just going to use Bilbo in the Gandalf Wizard Pipe deck. Or you're going to use Bilbo anytime you need a 2 willpower for 2 cost Spirit Ally, which is quite often, really. Flame of Arnor, or Flame of Unor. Add Flame of Unor, 1 cost. Add Flame of Unor to the victory display and discard the top card of your deck to ready an Istari character you control. That character gets plus X attack until the end of the phase, where X is the discarded card's cost. Very interesting. So the ideal usage for this is going to be like well, when you want a big spurt of attack power, it's usually going to be like to defeat a boss or something like that. I don't think this is something you would use every turn unless you had small enemies to defeat and duplicate cards in your deck. To use it reliably, you'd need to use it in combination with Wizard's Pipe. That's kind of a funny card. Gandalf smokes his pipe to prepare for battle. By the way, the art on that card is amazing. Flame of Arnor. Flame of Arnor. I like it. But if you are just relying on random luck, it may not be that reliable to get a big burst of attack power. In combination of Wizard's Pipe, you could take down some really powerful enemies more easily. Obviously, the max is going to be 6 with Bjorn. And that's not going to enable Gandalf to kill most bosses on his own. But it can be a contributor. Do I include Flame of Unor in the Gandalf deck? It readies him. That alone is worth something. I think I would include this, at least for playtesting. It's another complicated card to evaluate. But I think this Gandalf deck at least includes Galadriel, Bilbo, Flame of Unor, Gandalf Staff, and Wizard's Pipe from this set. And then probably a couple of other like low-cost heroes. I have a question though. When you're playing Gandalf with, say, 2 lore cards, 2 lore allies, that wouldn't be a monosphere lore deck, right? Well, I think if you're playing a card from the top of your deck, it would be. Because it says when playing a card this way, Gandalf is considered to have the printed icons. So, and the monosphere cards usually say if every hero has the printed icon. So you would, when playing a card from the top of your deck, not when playing a card from hand, but when playing it from the top of your deck, you could play monosphere cards if your other 2 heroes have the same sphere. Very interesting. I think the Gandalf deck is likely to be good against some very, very difficult quests. Similar to Elrondvillia. But it's also likely to be slow to set up. And a bit swingy, but same as Elrondvillia. Anyway, that's my opinion. I'm looking forward to trying these cards. Thanks for watching.